So the 9 box. It's a tool that we use that helps us do a plan, do, check, act, and solve problems, right? And we use it for 2 different methodologies. One is an event, and I'm sure you guys, everybody here participated in a Kaizen event before? Yeah, show of hands. All of you, good. So you know how the event goes and how the 9 box gets used. So the 9 box is used a little bit differently to do project management, strictly project management. So let's get into this a little bit, and when it starts to divert from an event type of 9 box, we'll talk a little bit more about it, right? So, in box 1 is where you're going to identify your burning platform. What's the problem you're trying to solve? What's the scope? What's the risk if you do nothing? Does this sound familiar to all you guys? Like I see a lot of familiar faces, and I know that you guys have been through this process. It just gives you a quick idea of, there's 4 things that we're looking for in box 1. 4 things. Without looking at the board. Or you can look at the board. What's one of them?
Purpose.
Purpose. What's 2?
Aim.
What?
Aim.
Aim. Yeah. What else?
Risk.
Risk. What else? Last thing.
Scope.
Scope. It's those 4 things. So if you remember those 4 things, regardless of an event or a project, you're going to start out with a good problem statement, a good identifier of what you're trying to do. Sometimes having the metrics included is something that's helpful for you as you just state it, but you don't state the exact goal or the current state. So we've even changed the name on the 9 box to metrics initial state, because we used to see people writing in the current state all kinds of things, just a whole bunch of words, or maybe a flow chart, maybe even a value stream map. None of those things are what we were looking for. So we renamed it to metrics initial state. The critical element of what's in box 2 is these are the measures that's going to prove where you are and whatever you've done in box 8 that you accomplished it. Make sense? Good. So, measuring the current and initial state of those metrics is in box 2. Visually representing the state is a graph or chart. Trended data. Why trended data? Why's it got to be trended?
Shows if we're winning or losing.
What's that?
Shows if we're winning or losing.
Winning or losing? Well, you need a goal then, right? A goal. What's that?
I just said show progress or shows
Progress or?
not.
So think about that. When you have a single point of data and you average it, does it tell you everything that you want to know about which direction you're going? How are you performing? Which direction are you headed? Are you declining or improving? No, it doesn't. It never does. Single point of data doesn't tell you enough. It's got to be trended. Trended data. So you want to be able to capture that, and you guys have tons of data when you're looking at a project at the scope of a year. So just look at your previous years. That's your current state. It's simple. It gives you a standard to be able to look backwards and say, this is where we've been, right? Not a single point of data, not just one thing rolled up into 1 year. Get some trended data. Okay? Box 3. What's box 3? Bobby, tell me what's box 3.
Our target, our goal.
Target condition. So whatever goals you have, you will mirror exactly the same number of goals. So you can't have 4 metrics in box 2 and only 3 goals. Box 2, 3, and 8 are always connected. Box 2, 3, and 8 are always connected. So whatever the number of metrics you guys decide on, that's the number of goals you're going to have in box 3. That's the number of results that you're going to show in box 8. Box 4 says gap analysis, root cause ID. So this is where we want to understand where we are in box 2 and the gap between box 2 and the goal that we have in box 3. Simple, right? It's just the gap. What's causing the gap? And you need to be able to understand that deeply. I don't care whether you use a 5Y, a fishbone. You could use whatever technique you need to use to be able to understand the situation. Why is there a gap? What's causing the gap? And we even suggest it. Fishbones, 5Y, go and see, whatever you need to do. Sometimes it needs to be a spaghetti diagram because you're trying to minimize how much forklift traffic is going to be going near where there's foot traffic. Spaghetti diagram would be better than a fishbone in that case, right? Use what's important for you. Be able to identify the gap. And so once you understand your root cause, that's when you move on. Don't rush through it. Don't think that you already have the answers if you haven't dwelled on the problem long enough. Okay?
Hey Ed,
Yes?
so I'm just curious, and I don't want to slow things down here, but when all the way back to box 1, when you're doing your reason for action, how do you determine what's too general or too generic? I mean, box 1, I want to solve world hunger, or box 1, more realistically, I want to reduce my injury rate. There's a whole lot of things that go into that. How do you know whether you've gotten too broad, and does it divide out into other Kaizen events? How does that work?
So the advice I typically would give on that's a really great question, because often if you go super generic, you're going to want to have 10 metrics. You're going to track so many different things trying to prove that generic statement. The tighter you go, the less metrics you're going to have to use to prove your case. And it's always about the metrics are just going to prove your case. Whatever you're trying to do, box 1 is saying, hey, this is what we're trying to get accomplished. And remember somebody said scope? Scope, I think it was you, Charles. And that's such an important element of a good 9 box. If you go too broad, you'll want to measure everything, and when you want to measure everything, you'll never get a sense of completing anything. So don't go too broad on what you're trying to solve.